There are songs you don't choose. They choose you, arriving through a speaker in another room, through a car window rolling past, through the thin wall of somewhere you didn't expect to feel anything, and before your mind has formed a single thought about why, something older than thought has already received it. The throat tightens, the hands slow. A specific kind of stillness arrives that has nothing to do with the music itself and everything to do with what the music found on its way in. You didn't invite it. You couldn't have stopped it. It landed before you decided whether to let it. That is not nostalgia. That is recognition. And the fact that you are here right now, that something guided you to this specific transmission on this specific day, is not accidental. Something in you already knew this window was open before you had any conscious language for what you were walking toward. Like this video, subscribe and write in the comments, "I am ready to receive," not as a wish, as a statement of where you already are. Say it as you type it. Your nervous system is listening to you even when you think you're only typing, because what's happening right now, in the sky, in the space between planets, in the precise geometry of where the light falls, is not ordinary. And the part of you that knows the difference between an ordinary moment and a threshold moment is the part that brought you here. This is not a feeling you invented. Stay with that. Right now, the Sun and Jupiter are meeting in Leo, and when those two forces occupy the same degree of the sky, they don't whisper, they illuminate, they expand. They take whatever has been quietly building in the interior of a person and bring it to the surface with a force that makes the ordinary feel suddenly, unmistakably charged. And you already felt that before you opened this. That's what the sound was carrying. That's why it had too much weight for its size. The force that governs light, identity, and what wants to be fully expressed, the Sun, has moved into Leo, the sign that does not do things quietly. Leo is the part of the sky that knows what it is. It does not perform its nature, it simply is it, completely, without apology and without asking permission. When the Sun moves through Leo, the pressure to be fully yourself, not the curated version, not the socially acceptable version, becomes almost physical. You feel it as a restlessness, a sense that something in you is trying to move forward and something else has been standing in its way. And Jupiter is already there waiting. Jupiter is the force that takes whatever it touches and makes it larger, more visible, more impossible to ignore. Not louder for the sake of noise, more real for the sake of truth. When Jupiter expands something, it's not creating something new. It's removing the compression that was keeping the real thing smaller than its actual size. What Jupiter does right now, in this sign, in this alignment, is take what you have been living at a compressed frequency and begin to let it breathe at its actual scale. These two forces meeting, the light of full self-expression and the expansion that removes false ceilings, create something that functions less like an event and more like an uncovering, as if a layer of something that was muffling the signal has been lifted, and what's underneath is not surprising. You have always known it was there. That's what makes this moment feel less like a revelation and more like a relief. But it doesn't stop there. The Sun and Jupiter are also making a precise connection to Uranus, the force in the sky that governs sudden clarity, not gradual understanding, but the specific experience of something snapping into focus that you have been looking at sideways for months. Uranus doesn't negotiate. It doesn't ease you into the knowing. It simply delivers it, complete and irrefutable, into the body before the mind has time to object. And today, Uranus is joining the signal from Leo and amplifying it with that quality of sudden, undeniable recognition. At the same time, Neptune, the force that makes the walls between what you feel and what you've been pretending not to feel suddenly thin, is in a trine with the Sun and Jupiter. Neptune dissolves the comfortable fictions, not cruelly, simply completely. The stories you have been telling yourself about why the timing isn't right, why you should be further along by now, why the feeling you carry is too large for the container of your current life. Neptune, in this alignment, makes those stories very difficult to sustain. And then there is Pluto, opposite the Sun and Jupiter, retrograde and in Aquarius. Pluto governs what must be permanently transformed, not adjusted, not improved, but changed at the root. In retrograde, it is moving through whatever in you has been built on a foundation that is no longer yours. Beliefs about what you deserve, stories about whether you can be trusted with what you want, patterns that were handed to you before you were old enough to choose them. Pluto does not ask, it simply excavates, and what it unearths today, under the light of the Sun-Jupiter conjunction, cannot be unseen. This is not a pleasant rearrangement. This is a destined one. And this alignment, this specific geometry of light and expansion and sudden clarity and dissolution and deep transformation, does not open for everyone. It opens for people who have been doing a particular kind of work, the kind that leaves no visible evidence on the surface. The portal activates for those who loved genuinely and did not receive the full weight of that love in return and chose to keep their dignity anyway. Not because keeping their dignity was easy, because something in them recognized what abandoning it would have cost. You did not demand explanations you weren't going to receive. You did not perform your pain outward in ways that would have felt temporarily satisfying and permanently diminishing. What you kept inside stayed clean because of it. You are the person who sat with a feeling that had no external validation for its existence. No one reflected it back to you. No one confirmed that what you were carrying was real and significant and worthy of being taken seriously. And instead of making the feeling smaller to fit the silence around it, you just kept carrying it, at full size, in private. That was not love failing. That was love being honest about what it had encountered. And the specific texture of what you walked through, the moments that felt like endings that turned out to be edits, you know exactly which ones those were. The silence that felt like rejection and turned out to be selection. The window that closed and felt like the universe withholding and turned out to be the universe building something that couldn't have been built if that window had stayed open. That was not you being unworthy of receiving. That was them being unready to give. And there is a profound difference between those two things. A difference that this alignment is making impossible to confuse any longer. What you have built inside yourself across that time is not dramatic. It has no surface presentation. No one would look at you and point to it. It happened in private, below the level of anything that could be announced or displayed. You renovated something in your interior, your relationship with your own knowing, your capacity to hold uncertainty without converting it immediately into urgency, your ability to trust something real even when the external conditions were not confirming it. That renovation happened quietly, completely, and it is precisely the credential this door requires, because what the silence was doing, what the distance and the unresolved feeling and the long stretch of not knowing were actually accomplishing, was something that protection does not always look like protection from the inside. If this had arrived 6 months ago or a year ago, you would have walked into it still needing it to answer something. The question of your own worth would have been alive inside you, still active, still looking for an external signal to resolve it. And that question, carried into a connection, doesn't get answered by the connection. It transforms the connection into a mirror for the question. Every interaction becomes data about whether you are enough. Every silence becomes evidence for a verdict that was never being rendered. The connection stops being about genuine contact and starts being about whether you are confirmed. What arrives now can be received as contact, as actual presence, as something real between two real people, not as a referendum on whether you deserve to be chosen. This is why the delay lasted as long as it did, not because the universe is indifferent to what you wanted, because the universe is more interested in what you are becoming capable of than in the speed at which comfort arrives. Saturn, the force that governs what gets to become permanent, does not open a door until both sides of it are ready, not in time, in truth. And the truth is that you had to stop needing the answer before you could receive the connection without distorting it. That is not loss. That is the most precise form of care the universe knows how to offer. The silence ended not on a calendar, but on an interior threshold you crossed without fanfare. Something in you stopped bracing. Something in you stopped scanning the horizon for confirmation. The question didn't get answered from outside. It simply stopped having the same grip from inside. And the moment that happened, quietly, without announcement, the delay completed its function. Now, on the other side of that silence, there is someone who has not had an easy time of it either. And what they are experiencing right now is not simple to describe because it is happening at a level below what they have access to through ordinary language. This person is not suppressing what they feel. They are not rationalizing it with a web of reasons they have constructed to justify the distance. They are doing something harder than either of those things. They are sitting at the exact edge of action, held in place not by avoidance but by the full weight of what honesty would require them to admit about what they want, about what they have not said, about what saying it would mean for the version of themselves they have been presenting to the world. There is a specific quality to what they carry. It is not the restless energy of someone who has made a decision and is waiting to act on it. It is the held breath quality of someone who can see the next step with complete clarity and is standing at the lip of it, understanding that taking it changes everything, including things they cannot fully predict. Right now, in this transit window, that held breath feeling has become almost unbearable. The Sun and Jupiter are flooding Leo with light and expansion. Neptune is thinning the walls between what they feel and what they've been pretending they don't. Pluto is retrograding through everything they built to keep themselves comfortable in the unresolved space. And the combined effect of all of that is that the room they built to contain what they feel, the ordered, quiet room where they filed the awareness of you, is full of light. Every corner, every carefully arranged reason for the distance, lit completely. The recognition is not new. What's new is that it has become too large to manage quietly. What they are feeling in their body right now is the specific discomfort of someone who knows, at every level beneath thought, what is true, and has not yet found the courage to let that truth become something they claim out loud. It lives in the quality of their attention during ordinary moments, the way a sound can arrive, music, a phrase, something passing through a speaker in another room, and carry your presence into a moment that had nothing to do with you. They don't choose that. It arrives before they can redirect. The moment their strategy stopped working, fully, undeniably, was probably not dramatic from the outside. It may have looked like a perfectly unremarkable hour, but inside it, something they had been maintaining with a low, constant effort simply ran out of reasons to keep holding. The logic that had been supporting the distance looked at itself and found nothing left to stand on. And in that moment, what was left was just the truth. Clean, undefended, impossible to file away again. They know. They have always known. Today is the day the knowing became too heavy to carry quietly. You are standing at a fork right now. Not a dramatic one. No one else would see it from outside. But internally, it is the most important position you have occupied in a long time. There is one version of this moment, the familiar one, that moves from a place of management. The background process of scanning, anticipating, monitoring, the part of you that has been running quietly in the background, tracking every signal, preparing for the next wave of uncertainty, organizing your interior around the possibility of control. It knows how to do this. It has been doing it for a long time. It is not malicious. It is simply scared of what happens if you stop. You are not being tested. You are being asked to show yourself what you have actually become. And then there is another version of this moment. It does not announce itself dramatically. It is quieter than the other one. It feels, from the inside, less like action and more like release. Like a grip that has been maintained at a low, constant level of tension finally, quietly, opening. Not because you decided to open it. Because holding became the thing that required more effort than letting go. One breath that doesn't organize itself around preparing for the next uncertainty. One moment of being fully inside where you are instead of perpetually positioned for where you might need to go. That is not indifference. That is not giving up. That is what genuine trust feels like in the body. And it is completely different from the tight, controlled experience of managing an outcome. The question that separates these two states is not intellectual. It lands in the body before the mind has finished forming it. Are you trying to make something safe, or are you willing to find out what it actually is? Sit with that. Not as a thought, as something you feel in your hands, in the quality of your next breath, and whether something in you tightens around the question or releases into it. The answer to that question is already in the body. It arrived before the mind formed the words. Trust what was there first. Now go deeper, because what this connection came to teach you was never about the other person. It was always about your relationship with your own knowing and whether you could hold what is real without needing to know in advance how it resolves. Soul contracts are not romantic arrangements. They are specific agreements about what must be confronted and integrated. This one, whatever form it has taken in your life, came with a precise instruction. Learn the difference between controlling what you love and trusting it. Learn what it costs to manage love rather than receive it. Learn what becomes available when you stop requiring certainty as a condition for presence. That lesson cannot be learned quickly. It cannot be learned theoretically. It requires the specific conditions of genuine uncertainty, of loving something real, of not knowing how it ends, of sitting inside that not knowing long enough to discover whether you can remain whole inside it. Saturn, the force that governs what is allowed to become permanent, does not pass this contract complete until the lesson is genuinely integrated, not performed, not intellectually understood. Integrated, meaning it has changed the way you actually function, not just the way you describe yourself. And the grief of recognizing this is real. Give it the full space it deserves. There is genuine loss in understanding that a connection was always primarily a classroom, that the hope you carried for a specific kind of arrival was in service of a transformation that did not require that arrival to be real. Grief is not weakness here, it is accuracy. It is the appropriate emotional response to seeing clearly what something was, what it genuinely was, not what you needed it to be. The contract was specific, not forever, not even reunion, but the permanent, irreversible shift in how you understand what love requires of you. And that shift has already happened, not as a decision, as something that is simply, quietly, undeniably true when you look honestly at who you are now versus who you were when this began. What completion looks like through this specific lesson is not the arrival of certainty. It is the capacity to hold uncertainty without converting it into urgency, to love something real without needing to know the outcome in advance, to feel stable inside the not knowing. That is not a small thing. That is the whole thing. And you have it. What ends here is not the love. What ends is the version of the connection that could only exist while the lesson was still unfinished. The love, if it was real, does not require the dynamic to survive. Your body already knows this. It has known it longer than your mind has been willing to confirm. Notice the quality of stillness that has been arriving in you, not all at once, not dramatically, but in small increments that have been accumulating. Sleep that comes earlier than it used to and leaves less residue when you wake. Not the deep fatigue of someone who finally crashed, the natural settling of someone whose nervous system has stopped running a process it no longer needs to run. There is a difference, and your body knows it. The quiet in your body right now, if you let yourself feel it fully, is not emptiness. It does not have the hollow quality of shutdown or resignation. It has weight to it. Substance, the specific quality of something that is genuinely finished versus something that has merely been paused. There is the way that a name, one you know, can pass through your awareness now without the same physical bracing that used to accompany it. It arrives. It is present for a moment, and then it passes through like weather, real, acknowledged, and not catastrophic. Where it once arrived like a hook, it now arrives like a fact. That is not the quiet of having given up on something. That is the quiet of something that has been genuinely set down by a hand that is no longer holding it with white knuckles. The quality of your thinking has changed too. Decisions that used to require extended internal negotiation, the kind where two conflicting parts of you argued until exhaustion rather than clarity, now resolve faster, not because you became more decisive, because the internal argument has one fewer active participant. Something that was pulling in the opposite direction has run out of reasons. Where it once felt like waiting, this period is revealing itself as something else entirely, not patience, not endurance. A becoming, quiet, invisible, and now complete enough to feel in the body as something that is present rather than something that is missing. This is not the quiet of having given up. This is the quiet of something that is genuinely finished. The body knows the difference, even when the mind is still catching up. And as that settledness becomes your baseline, not a temporary state, but the actual frequency you carry, your life begins to organize itself differently around you. Decisions feel cleaner, not because life became simpler, but because the internal noise that used to crowd every choice has gone quieter. You are no longer negotiating with a part of yourself that needs external confirmation before it will allow you to trust your own direction. That part completed its work. What remains moves from one direction instead of several, and that single-directedness is something other people feel in you before they can name it. The things that used to require a decision no longer do. The body has already made it. Quietly, without drama, without a moment you can point to, it simply stopped being available for certain costs. What used to feel exciting in a draining way, the push and pull, the uncertainty that masqueraded as intensity, now registers as hollow before it even fully lands. Not because you have become hard or closed, because you have become accurate. Your body can now tell the difference between genuine connection and the feeling of connection without the substance behind it. It could always sense the difference. Now it trusts what it senses. And what used to feel like safety, the familiar ceiling of a dynamic that kept you smaller than you actually are, now registers as a ceiling. Not nostalgia for it, just clear-eyed recognition that it was never the right size for you. The universe is no longer trying to guide you toward alignment. It is beginning to respond to the alignment you already carry. Synchronicities are changing their character. They stop feeling like nudges toward something you haven't yet reached. They start feeling like confirmations of where you already are. The universe reflecting back a frequency rather than pointing toward a destination. Other people's energy is easier to read accurately now, not because you became more perceptive, because you are no longer filtering everything through the distortion of unresolved wounds. When something is real, you feel that it is real immediately. When something is performance, you feel that immediately too. This is not cynicism. This is what it feels like when discernment stops being effortful. You are not waiting to become someone. The becoming already happened, in private, without announcement, in the exact window where it had to happen to be real. What is here now is not preparation. It is arrival, and what arrives with it is a set of things your nervous system can no longer accommodate. Not as a rule you made, as a biological fact about who you have become, being held at emotional arm's length by someone who knows exactly what they feel, who is fully aware of the connection and has chosen comfortable ambiguity over the discomfort of honesty, no longer passes through you without response. Where it once felt tolerable, even familiar, it now registers immediately as incompatible, not with a rule you are applying, with what you actually are. This is a micro hook worth pausing on. What changed is not that you decided to want something different. What changed is that a part of you that used to accept partial presence as enough has been retired. That part is not resting. It is finished, and a finished part of you cannot be temporarily reinstalled for someone who needs you to have it available. Carrying the full weight of a connection while someone else remains comfortable in its ambiguity, being the one who holds the truth, the depth, the full reality of what exists between two people while they maintain the luxury of uncertainty, is no longer something your system can sustain, not because you became demanding, because you became honest about what sustaining it actually cost and what you were paying it with. The experience of explaining your depth to someone who used your explanation as evidence that you were too much, that specific soul-eroding dynamic, your body now identifies it before your mind has finished processing the situation. Like a trained ear catching a wrong note without having to deliberate, it arrives, and something in you already knows. And waiting for an honesty that someone has already decided you don't deserve, spending your presence and your patience on a dynamic where the other person has quietly decided that the truth is not something you have earned the right to receive. That pattern is no longer available to you as a resting place. It is not that you closed yourself. You clarified. And clarity does not reduce what is possible. It removes what was never going to be real anyway, and makes the remaining space available for what actually is. Now, if this soul steps back into your field, there is something important to understand about how you will receive them. The question of whether they return is no longer the question that governs your interior, but when the answer arrives, in whatever form it takes, you will be able to read it accurately. Perhaps for the first time, because the distortion that used to bend the signal is quieter now. Hope is not gone, but it is no longer louder than perception. Fear is not gone, but it is no longer louder than discernment. What arrives in your field will be received by someone who is present, grounded, and capable of seeing clearly what is actually there, not the version shaped by longing, not the version compressed by anxiety. The actual thing. If they return, what your body registers first will matter more than what they say, not the gesture of contact, the quality underneath it, whether something in them has genuinely shifted or whether they are returning to the feeling of you without having done the internal work that would make that feeling sustainable. You will know the difference, not immediately in your thoughts, immediately in your body, and whether something in you settles further into itself or quietly, without drama, notes that what arrived is the same version of what was, and if they return and it is real, you receive it from wholeness, from a place that does not need it to complete something, from the version of you that can be fully present to another person without disappearing into them. The connection that becomes possible from that place is categorically different from what existed before, not continued, genuinely different. Two people meeting on ground that is solid under both of them. If they do not return, and it is important to look at this directly, without looking away from it, what the absence confirms is not what you feared. It does not confirm that you were too much or not enough, or that the love was one-sided in the way that indicts. What it confirms is that the version of the dynamic that existed between you required something in you to remain unresolved, and that version of you is no longer available. What cannot meet you where you stand now is not a verdict on your worth. It is simply information about the fit, about whether what is arriving is sized for who you actually are. Both doors open onto something real now, not because the outcomes are equal, because you are no longer different people depending on which one walks through. That steadiness is the thing. That is everything. If something in this transmission landed somewhere specific, not just in your thinking but in your body, do one thing before you move on. Like this video. Not as a courtesy, as a signal to yourself that you were here, that you were present, that you chose to receive this rather than simply let it pass through. Subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. These transmissions are connected to each other. What opens in one window feeds directly into what becomes available in the next. The thread matters, and in the comments, write, "I trust what's arriving." Say it out loud as you type it, not for the comments section, for your own nervous system. Because there is something that completes in the body when you give language to what is true, when you stop holding it privately and let it be real in the world, even in the small way of a typed sentence spoken aloud. And if someone in your life is standing at a threshold they cannot quite name, if someone you know has been carrying something real for a long time in silence, send this to them. Your instinct about who that is will be right. Something is here. Not arriving, here. Already landed, already real, already changing the quality of what is possible. You did not need to force this into being. You did not need to manage it or steer it or hold it together with effort. This is what alignment actually feels like when it is genuine, not the result of pushing in a direction, but the quiet recognition that the direction was always there, underneath everything, waiting for you to stop moving fast enough to feel it. The door did not open dramatically. It simply became visible, and you are already standing inside what you came here for. And that, the feeling of standing inside something rather than reaching toward it, is worth sitting with longer than you might think. Because most people move past this moment too quickly. They feel the shift, they register the change, and then they immediately begin asking what comes next. What do I do with this? Where does this go? How do I make sure it stays? But the asking is the old pattern, and you are not in the old pattern anymore. What you are in right now is something that does not require action to be real. It does not need to be steered. It does not need to be confirmed by an external signal before it is allowed to exist. It is already existing, in the quality of your breath right now, in the specific texture of what it feels like to be inside this moment without the low hum of urgency underneath it. That hum, that constant, barely audible frequency of not yet, not enough, not certain, is quieter than it has been in a long time, maybe quieter than it has ever been. Notice that, not as a sign of something coming, as the thing itself. This is not waiting with better posture. This is arrival in its actual form, not dramatic, not announced, not accompanied by the fanfare the mind always imagined would mark it. Arrival feels like this, like ordinary life, slightly relit from within, Like the same room with the same objects and the same view from the window, except that something about the quality of your presence inside it has permanently changed. Where it once felt like you were moving through your days with one part of your attention perpetually allocated elsewhere, to the unresolved thing, the unnamed feeling, the person, or the question that lived in the background of everything, that allocation has shifted. It hasn't disappeared, but it is no longer running at the same cost. The background process has slowed, not because you forced it to stop, because it completed what it was doing and found no further instructions. That is a specific, physical thing, not a metaphor. You can feel the freed attention as something almost like space, a quality of room in the mind that was not there before. What you do with that space matters, not urgently, but intentionally. Because the Leo sky right now, this Sun-Jupiter light, this expansive, warm, unapologetic frequency, is not asking you to be careful. It is asking you to be full, not louder than you are, not larger than what is true, simply willing to take up the space that actually belongs to you without preemptively making yourself smaller to accommodate someone else's comfort with your size. You have been doing that longer than you realize. The small adjustments, the sentence you edited before it left your mouth, the desire you held back not because it was wrong but because you weren't certain it would be received. The version of yourself you brought into a room after quietly negotiating with the fuller version at the door. Leo does not negotiate at the door. Leo walks in as itself, and right now, with Jupiter amplifying that frequency and Uranus sharpening it into sudden clarity, the call is toward a version of yourself that does not require the room's approval before it decides to be present. This is not arrogance. This is not performance. It is simply the experience of being in full contact with what you actually are, without the layer of management between your interior and the world, without the half-second delay where you check whether it is safe to be real before you let the real thing show. What the transit is asking, precisely, specifically for you, is whether you are willing to receive the love that this alignment is moving into your field without immediately beginning to manage it, without immediately assessing its reliability, without constructing the system of proof you have historically required before you were willing to call something real. Stay with that question, because that question is where the old pattern lives most stubbornly, not in the big decisions, in the small, quiet reflexes, the way a good thing arrives and the mind immediately begins cataloging the ways it could end. The way a genuine moment of connection is met not just with presence but with a simultaneous background process of evaluation. Is this safe? Is this real? Will this hold? What does it mean if it doesn't? That background process is what trust, genuine trust, the trust this soul contract came to build, is the opposite of. Not the opposite of caution, the opposite of the specific reflex that converts every good thing into a liability assessment before it is allowed to be simply good. Jupiter in Leo does not do liability assessments. It simply expands into what is real and lets the expansion be its own answer. And right now, with this alignment, that frequency is available to you as something you can actually inhabit, not as a concept, as a way of being in the next hour, in the next conversation, in the next moment when something good arrives and you feel the old reflex reaching for its clipboard. You can let the clipboard down, not permanently, not as a vow, just in this moment, and then the next one, and then the one after that. That is how trust actually builds, not as a decision made once, as a practice of choosing presence over management, one small moment at a time, until the practice becomes the default and the management becomes the thing that requires effort. And here is what becomes available when the management quiets. You become legible, not transparent, legible. The people who are genuinely meant to be in contact with you can find you, not the performance of you, not the edited version, not the you that has been pre-negotiated for palatability, the actual frequency you carry. And the actual frequency you carry right now is one of the most precisely aligned you have ever been. This is not a small thing. People spend years trying to arrive at this frequency through the wrong methods, through force, through strategy, through making themselves into something they imagine is more receivable. But the frequency that draws what is genuinely aligned is not built through construction. It is revealed through the removal of what was obscuring it. And what you have been living through, the silence, the uncertainty, the long internal renovation, was precisely that removal. You were not building something new, you were uncovering something original. What is original in you has always been the signal. It was just buried under everything that was trying to make itself acceptable. Right now, that signal is cleaner than it has been, and the Sun and Jupiter in Leo are putting a light on it that the right presence, in whatever form that takes, will not be able to miss. There is a specific quality to the way this feels from the inside that is worth naming clearly. It does not feel like waiting. It does not have the texture of anticipation, of leaning forward, of scanning the horizon. It feels more like having turned around and discovered that the horizon was behind you all along. That what you were moving toward, you were already inside. That the destination was not ahead. It was the quality of presence you were learning to inhabit on the way. And the soul that is connected to yours right now, the one sitting at the edge of action, holding the full weight of what they have not yet said, is, in its own way, arriving at something similar. They are not arriving at it gracefully. They are arriving at it under pressure, the way most people arrive at honesty, through the exhaustion of the alternative, through the specific moment when maintaining the comfortable version of the story costs more than telling the true one. That moment is close. Not as a promise about what they will do, as a fact about what is happening in their interior. The transit is doing to them what it is doing to everything, illuminating what has been held in shadow, expanding what has been compressed, removing the comfortable fictions through the specific solvent of Neptune's influence in trine with the Sun. You do not need to reach toward them to make that happen. It is already happening. What you need, what this entire transmission has been moving you toward, is simply to be present inside your own life, at your own actual frequency, without managing it down to something more convenient. Because the version of you that is managing will never be the version that the right presence can find. Management is a disguise, a very well-intentioned, very understandable, very human disguise, but a disguise nonetheless. And what is aligned with you does not need to find a disguise. It needs to find you. So this is what this transit asks. At its most precise, stop disguising. Not all at once, not with an announcement, not with a grand gesture of openness that is, in its own way, another kind of performance. Simply, in this moment, and then the next one. Let what is true be true without the editorial layer in between. Let the feeling be its actual size. Let the knowing be as certain as it actually is. Let the love, for whatever or whoever carries that word for you, be as real as it has always been, without the hedging that made it feel more manageable and less exposed. That is the invitation of the Sun conjunct Jupiter in Leo. That is what this alignment does when it is received rather than managed. It does not add anything to you. It removes the compression, and what expands when compression is removed is simply what was always there. Full-sized, full frequency, full contact with the life that was always meant to be yours. This is not the beginning of something new. This is the uncovering of something original, and what is original does not need to be built. It only needs to be allowed. Allow it now, not tomorrow, not when the conditions feel safer. Now, in this breath, in this moment, in the full and unhurried reality of exactly where you are. The door that opened is the door you are already standing inside. That is not a metaphor. That is where you are.